This podcast is supported by Hannover Messe, your meeting place for the industrial community.
Hi there, and welcome to a new episode of the Industrial AI Podcast. My name is Peter Seberg, and I'm your host. Today we'll be talking to Armin Hadzalic. He is a senior software developer with Siemens. And Armin and I are going to be talking about what other topic could I have chosen for my first recording of the year 2025, agents, more specifically industrial AI agents. Hi, Armin.
Hello, Peter. Good morning. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, you're welcome. Please introduce yourself to our listeners and maybe in combination with 2-3 words about the company. I may assume that close to 100% of our listeners have heard about Siemens. And for that reason, maybe 2 or 3 lines more about the division that you're working in.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm 50 years old, married. I have 2 sons. So originally, I'm from Remscheid. That's a city who don't know, between Cologne and Dortmund.
I've heard about it, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm living in Nuremberg almost 19 years now. Yes, 19 years. And from my career path, I can say that I have worked 25 years in the automation industry so far. I began first as an electronics technician and PLC programmer back then in the 90s. That's really far away. And I studied then process automation at the college in Wuppertal. From there, then I started to work in several positions like application engineer and software engineer on machine tools and big automation lines, also robot lines, testing lines. Of course, that led to global activities really all over the world for big companies like Bosch, Daimler, VW, BASF, and you name it. And in 2011, I got an offer from Siemens to work there as a software developer on the TIA portal, and I thought that might be a really good opportunity to work also on the tool which I have used basically on everyday basis in my work. And yeah, I joined Siemens, so I'm a Siemensianer from then. And yes, the machine learning journey on my side began around 5 years ago. So back then we basically wanted to improve our processes with, you can say classic machine learning approaches, for example, to predict bugs and stuff like this. And then suddenly 2022, there was this launch of ChatGPT and from OpenAI, and we wanted to see if we can generate code with that tooling. And it turned out it was quite good for us to make a proof of concept. So this is also basically then the starting point of the industrial co-pilot. You might have heard about that, initiated by my team and me. So, and this is the journey from my perspective. So, and this is also the project I'm currently working on. So you wanted to know what I'm doing at Siemens with a few words, and this is it. So we are running, or we want to implement now the second version of the industrial co-pilot for engineering. And yeah, that's the current state on my side.
Well, but it's a great start. Thanks for that. And why not stay with the co-pilot for a moment? And then we're going to be moving into agents. But tell us a little bit more about what is your industrial co-pilot? Since when have you been working on it? Who is your partners? What are the typical use cases? Is it a product that your customers buy? Let's talk a little bit about the industrial co-pilot.
Yeah, sure. So the industrial co-pilot is, you can say an umbrella term for a lot of co-pilots beneath. So you can think of the PLM process, and there we want to have for each of the sections a co-pilot. So it starts everything with design and planning. So then you have the engineering phase, which is very important to have a co-pilot in, and operations part, then also the service sector. So all these, let's say, segments, we want to have a co-pilot for our customers. And the first version, I said it already, was self-service. So means we delivered the engineering co-pilot to our customers, and they had the chance to, or they had to adapt or to connect to their Azure environment in order to get a connection to the language models. That's why we call this a self-service. It is for free, so it is you can download it from our website. But we got also the feedback from customers that they don't want to struggle with configurations and setting up environments on their own. So they want to have a managed service, and that's why we are aiming now for realizing this version 2, which will be a managed service, at least for the engineering co-pilot where I'm working at.
Right. And in the end, the co-pilot is helping, in this case, the engineers to do what? To set up their engineering environment, or, they can ask specific questions.
Exactly. So the basic idea is, and you can see this in the version 1 we have 3 major use cases there. The first use case is, of course, to understand our software much better. So you can use our tier portal, of course, and if you stuck in some problem, you can ask the F1 help. Of course, there's a documentation behind, but this is more keyword search, and sometimes it does not really answer your questions. That's why we thought this is one of the first use cases we want to bring in our engineering system, in our tier portal, to be able really to talk to this documentation and then to get much better results. And other use cases for the V1 were, of course, I mentioned it also, PLC code generation, especially SCL, so structured text. And we are also able to help the engineers while he or she is creating visualizations, so HMI. So this is where our co-pilot starts helping the engineer.
Very good. I think this is very important. I mean, and while, of course, the industrial co-pilot is, I would say in general, right, is state of the art where we are with our technology in an industrial environment. Today, we're going to be talking, maybe that's correct to say, one step further. I don't know. We will see. But for that reason, it's very important, is maybe at some point we will talk about, and you already talked about it, you learned, about PLC programming, as I would assume probably not tens, but more like hundreds of thousands other, including listeners, have been doing and are still doing. That's another discussion we will have later. But starting from the PLC programming as an example, then moving towards an industrial co-pilot, and then moving towards agents, because you shared a post, I think it was just before Christmas, wasn't it? It was titled Building Agents That Deliver Real Value, in which you say, I'm not going to go through the complete thing, but just the first bit, you say, in the rush to build AI agents, it's easy to get lost in technology and frameworks. Just last week, I heard, so as you heard, at least half a dozen definitions of what agents are and what they're not. So let's get into your post and the topic there. Which of the many definitions that you heard did you like most?
Wow, that's seems to be a short question, but it can lead to a long answer. Typically,
that's what we're here for.
Yeah, typically such questions, that's my experience at least, end up in big discussions. If you would like to have an too long didn't read sentence from my side, then and this is really the current state, then I would say that agents are kind of systems which can somehow act autonomously and proactively. This is the basis where I start talking about agents. Of course, I heard a lot of other definitions. I learned also from Andrew Ng. This is personally a definition which I really, really like, where he says that agents, from his perspective, should have 4 features, which is reflection, which the ability to use tools, planning, and to have the ability to collaborate with other agents. So this is something I like also personally, but I have no problem if somebody states something like this: my thermostat is an agent. So because really I listened or looked also for other papers and just to learn what an agent is. And I think In the 50s, this term is somehow firstly defined. I'm not sure, but I found a very good introduction or definition from Wooldridge and Jennings from 95, Intelligent Agents, Theory and Practice. And basically what they state there that is also having some features related to an agent, which is autonomy, reactivity, and social ability. And this social ability you can translate also to a term like communication. So it should be at least able to communicate with other systems. And a thermostat from that perspective, of course, cannot communicate with other, let's say, persons or systems, but it has the reactivity feature in it. So that's why I can say this is for me absolutely okay if somebody says this is also an agent, because it always depends on the context. This is also crucial to say here. If you talk about agents, then consider the context you have around that, and then you are good to go, I guess. And nowadays, maybe the last words for the definition of agents from my perspective is, besides these three basic properties an agent should have, and nowadays there are two more, and this is already mentioned also by Andrew Eng. This is planning and the ability really to adapt. So I think if you go with that approach, then you can hold some discussions about agents.
That's okay. I think it's important. I was going to go into the hype first, but I'm going to move that back a couple of minutes and then I was going to discuss, and you already started doing that, but there is this other one. I'm not sure that you know that one. It's actually from 96. You said 1905, so that's 30 years old. That was a paper called, is it an agent or just a program? And that's a question that was asked 30 years ago. And if we then, in a sec, going to talk about the hype and the positive and maybe the negative side of the hype, it's very important to realize that exactly that question was asked already 30 years ago as well. So that's from Stan Franklin, Arthur C. Gresser, University of Memphis. And they say the advent of software agents 30 years ago gave rise to much discussion of just what such an agent is. See?
Yeah.
Exactly like today.
Yeah, exactly.
And of how they differ from programs in general. And I think that is important, yeah. So here we propose a formal definition, and it's not about, I wanted exactly what you did. It's not about the one-line thing, though if at some point in time we could agree, of an autonomous agent. So I'm not going to go further here, but I will share what they 30 years ago suggested, and you'll see there's quite some overlap with what you said. So they say an autonomous agent, which is not what we had talked about. It's very important that this word autonomous can be or cannot be. We'll talk about that. An autonomous agent, they say, is a system situated within and part of an environment that senses that environment. Interestingly, this very moment when we are recording, we put live the recording that Robert did with SICK Sensor. So we have many sensor companies, including your own, I guess, that senses the environment and acts on it over time in pursuit of its own agenda, and so as to affect what it senses in the future. So there is this, I think there's quite some overlap with what you said.
Yeah, definitely. I like the definition personally, I must say. So maybe you can share the link afterwards. So
yeah, most certainly. I was going to say that, yeah. I'll put the link in for everybody to look at as well. And actually, maybe a bit later we'll get there, I'm not sure. But I think actually today what the huge difference for me 30 years ago and today is, for me today, an agent starts with a large language model. So I think that the huge difference is that what I'm certain they could not do 30 years ago, your interface with whatever was the agent had to be implicitly verbal text, right? Programming code, I guess, typically. And that's what I believe is the huge difference. And that's why you just started talking about the Copilot. And the Copilot I can talk to, I can write to if I want to, but I can talk to as well. Okay, before we then move on, and you're going to tell us what it is that you like about, or what we already heard you didn't like, or you do not necessarily like, is working with technology frameworks. But I'm going to be asking you how do you build agents, and then we're going to go into what are the different kinds of agents and stuff like that. Let's stay a little bit with the hype here. It seems that really so suddenly that I have not seen another technology, but that's probably not true. It's always like, when when did we get the smartphone? Was it 20 years ago? And when did we have the internet? Was that 30 years ago? But this one seems really almost like within a couple of weeks at the end of 2024, but maybe that's not correct. It always depends on your bubble. But everybody talking about agents now, and I believe you are, and we will hear, a supporter of a certain way of building agents. It's important to me that we're going to give a platform also to maybe one or the other that's going to more believe in the negative side, let's say, of the Gartner hype cycle. The Gartner hype cycle, most of you know it. I think it's a wonderful tool. Whoever came up with that idea also probably 30 years ago. So, all of these new technologies need to move up what they call this peak of inflated expectation, and they need to come down. They need to come down this, what they call this trough of disillusionment. And not all technologies do, right? Some are really only a hype. So a year later, every technology comes down and you never hear of it again. In case of agents, I am personally completely certain that agents going to be big for the next whatever, as far as we can look in the next 3, 4, 5 years, think. But tell me, how do you think, why is that? Why, I mean, do you have the same experience that is suddenly coming? We had a year or two large language models, and now suddenly everybody talking agents?
Yes, sure. I mean, I want to compare it also with your topics you mentioned with rising of the internet and mobile phone and smartphones and stuff like this. But these were all they were dedicated in a certain space. I mean, with a smartphone, you cannot cook. Of course, you can read a recipe and stuff like this. But I have a feeling now with the agents, all areas are affected somehow. So, and that's why I think that the hype around the technology itself is absolutely justified. So, and I don't think this is like a short-term hype and it will exactly follow this Gartner line. Of course, at some point it will look like this, but it will be kind of extended. I think the space or the line will be extended to some degree. As I said, the hype is absolutely justified. And I think because really all areas are affected in some way. Because let's imagine this. Agents can automate repetitive tasks, so over and over. So they are much, much better executing workflows in a more efficient way and in almost all areas you can imagine. And this is, I think, why everybody's fascinated about this topic. And me too.
Yeah, you as well. Yeah. That's already makes 100% between you and me. Yeah, but not everybody. I do want. I'm not going to name names. Yeah, Robert and I did that, but I'm perfectly happy, and we're going to come to Satya's quote very soon as well, and link there. But let's listen. And it's an interesting point you make. I've been making similar. I believe that artificial intelligence, as the general term, the machine learning, good old-fashioned AI, moving into Gen AI, etc., already started doing that, is my feeling. I've been giving many examples where we, of course, in the Industrial AI podcast, concentrate. The core of what we do is what happens on the shop floor, so to say, where you are a specialist. But we sometimes go very far out. And then I've been giving examples of a physician, a doctor that looks at your skin. And I've been saying exactly the same. The technology approaches are growing so strongly together. And that's okay, you haven't talked about Siemens at the top level, but I know that you have, at least there's other pieces in Siemens that take care medical imaging, for example. So I think that's very interesting, where in the past you would say, what has a doctor, physician to do with technology on a shop floor? And today, the technology behind it, looking at data is very similar, right? So let's talk about building agents. So in your LinkedIn post, you say the best agents focusing on delivering practical outcomes. This approach avoids overcomplicating agents with specific technologies or theoretical frameworks. So how have you built agents? Can you share an example or two?
Yes, and I mentioned also in this article or in my post that it's not really important at the beginning to focus completely on the technology stack. So you might then end up with having, I don't know, a bunch of technologies, frameworks stick together and possibly also not working very well together, but just to have kind of latest technology around a need. I mentioned that really first you have to focus on the use case itself. So you have to deep dive into the domain and figure out how can I help with this approach, with an agent concept, my customer. And for example, I mentioned it also in the V1, and it will be also in the V2 of our industrial copilot. Let's help the customer to understand your tool better. So this is the Doku agent. So build a Doku agent. Focus on the things where you have a really customer benefit. So where the solution benefits the customer, and not too much looking at the technology. At some point, you will have to do this. Exactly, that's absolutely true. And there's also sometimes, and I had this in my experience, the fear: did we choose the right framework? And now I heard about a new technology on my X account, and it gives you the feeling that might not, your solution might not be the latest, or it is not future proofed, right? And we built agents, or we are implementing them currently. And for that, you have to really decide a framework where you go with. On our side, it is the semantic kernel for different reasons. We might change this in the future, but currently this is our framework to go for building agents. And I mean, we can talk also about the architecture maybe later, but focus first on the domain you want to somehow realize, and then think about the framework and technique around.
I mean, that's the general, I would say, potential issue, going with the technology first or with the use case first. So that's very good to hear that confirmed from you as a professional. I've always been saying, like, it's perfectly okay to just, as a techie, and a techie in a positive sense of the word, because I've been working with techies all my life, it feels like. And I think it's perfectly okay to take a technology and sit down and play with it. And then just to be very, very careful to not continue playing for a day or a week or a month or half a year. And then suddenly on the way there is some solution comes up, because then you are probably on the wrong way. But play with it. But then at the same time, as you say, then start looking on the use case. Maybe it's not always the same person, but then your colleague needs to look at the use case and needs to sit together with the technology person. Now, when you say semantic kernel, did I hear that? Is that something similar to or different from a framework?
It can be compared with LangChain, for example, and other frameworks. Basically, the decision for us is community driven. So it's open source. It has a stable version already. It's backed by Microsoft. You have a really living backlog. You can take a look at this. The roadmap they are sharing is always up to date. And if I might say this, if you have the possibility also to join office hours at some framework, then this is really the thing to go. And if there's not much transparency, then I would avoid frameworks or using the frameworks. But semantic kernel from Microsoft does a very, very good job. And it is also used by Microsoft itself in their Office packages. So that's a good reason to count on this.
We happen to come to Microsoft in just a sec, but from a different perspective, but maybe things are never completely separated, I guess. What is the status of what you do? I just mentioned this, start playing with things. Where are you? Have you been thinking about use cases? Do you have a demo or two? Are you moving closer towards a productization of a specific use case? What can you share an example or two with us?
Yeah. The version we have currently out there is the version 1. So one can download this on our webpage. I mentioned the use cases which are there included, which is basically PLC programming in the form of SCL, HMI creation, and the docu use case. And of course, we want to extend the portfolio here from our engineering perspective. Tier Portal itself is a wrapper around a lot of domains. And in reality, I mean, there is no PLC, or let's say it like this, there is no engineer who really understands everything in Tier Portal. So you typically have in the beginning an hardware configuration specialist who makes the topology from a program. Then afterwards you have a coding specialist, and further, you have HMI specialists. So these are all domains packed in one big Tier Portal. And we want to extend our portfolio also in the Industrial Copilot to really be able to help the customers in all of these domains. And this is our goal. We will extend our portfolio in the version 2. So it will, I mean, I cannot really say what everything will be included, but it will be extended definitely. It will have the content of version 1, of course, but it will be extended to some degree. And yeah.
But is there a structural difference between, I believe that the HMI creation as a very interesting use case, that was a typical example of the industrial copilot. And are you extending that? Are you now making an agent, or what you now, do you call them agents or maybe not? I don't know. So is it gradual improving, moving forward within the overall industrial copilot, or?
Yes, we are improving, definitely. I mean, for the version 1, we had this approach where you had to first define in what area you want to have help from Gen AI perspective. So basically we had 3 radio buttons there. And if you wanted to have some PLC coding, then you would have to check this checkbox. And otherwise, if you have questions to the Tier Portal itself and you want to have the documentation use case, then you had to press the other button. And this is something which will not be anymore in version 2. So we will have one common overview where you just can ask. And basically from the technique beneath, of course, is you have these agents. I mentioned the several domains we have in Tier Portal. And this will be more or less specialized agents. So you will have in the future a hardware configuration agent and maybe technology agent and so on and so on. Yeah, and basically you don't have to define this before you start. And it makes also the workflow much easier, because in our version 1, you were stick to PLC programming once you had this button activated there. So there was no possibility to send a request stating, oh, give me please some SCL code regarding, I don't know, some examples. And then from that point on, create also an HMI screen, which reflects then, I don't know, the sensor, which is somehow manipulated in the SCL program. So there was no possibility to interact with different domains in one request. And this is, of course, then possible if you have agents which are waiting for the whole request, and the requests are then routed to the several agents, and they perform then their work. So this is basically a big improvement from our side.
Make sure that you share with me the download URLs. We're going to share with our listeners.
Yes, sure.
Now, actually, it's very good and very interesting that you shared, and as one of the examples, use cases, the HMI creation, because we're going to be moving into HMI. Moving on with your LinkedIn post, you said in the end, the key to building exceptional agents is not technology first thinking, human first design, right? So we kind of talked about that, but I do want to go a little bit further into exactly this human first design now. But before we get into the UI design, Tom Cadera and all the other user interface designers are going to love or hate the following section, I believe. I already referred to Microsoft, and it's not anyone from Microsoft, but it was their CEO, Satya Nadella, also just before Christmas, he said in a public video, right, that agents will replace all software,
including their software too. It's not only.
yeah. He was talking about Excel. He was kind of questioning, should I or should I not use Excel, as far as I understood it.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Okay. But I want to be careful with my quotes there. But it felt to me like the 100 billion, should I say the $100 trillion quote from nobody less than, Satya. And I would have thought latest from that time on that everyone would have understood the implication of the reality of the threat opportunity of agents. Right now, I then personally recognize what I've been saying. Jerry Yu, not sure you know him, founder of Brain AI, and he partnered like a year ago already with Deutsche Telekom, and they were showing a year ago at Barcelona Mobile World Congress a smartphone with no apps, and I really, well, I was completely convinced already at that time that was going to be the future. So I want to discuss that with you, though. Now, let's talk UI design and apps. How does a typical, and starting with, and you just made a reference already, if I today go to a modern shop floor solutions, and not the one that has been there for 10, 20 years, but if you say, okay, you just had a customer who bought a solution from you and you go there, and then how does the user interface today of a modern shop floor solution look like?
You mean from the engineering perspective?
Well, we can look at both, I guess, if maybe that's interesting to do. The engineering is one, and maybe that's the one that you were referring to. But I was also thinking about is that maybe what you typically more call the MES. You walk towards your machine, and there is some kind of interface. The machine, maybe the complete production line is standing still. You get there at 6 a.m. in the morning. You're the first one to start. That's maybe that one. What I want to understand is probably going to change, but maybe at the other time, the engineering perspective is also one that you want to share with us.
Yeah, I mean, there are different ways to interact or add UI technologies to this solution stack. I mean, we are aiming for, and this is the current state, to have a side-by-side implementation. So means we want to operate on our tier portal, for example, and we will not have this industrial copilot inside the tier portal itself, so inside the UI. So as I said, it is a side-by-side installation, and you have a window where the industrial copilot is and where you can state your request, and you have the normal tier portal. That might change in the future so that we will have implementations directly in the software itself. But this is the state we are aiming right now. It might change. I don't have the vision for that, to be honest, how it will look like, but it will have kind of interface where you really, maybe also just talk, not write anymore, not entering a request, but really talking. Also in engineering environment. So, I mean, we are used to type, right? Coding, it's always typing, but that might also change in the future. And I don't know how this...
Yeah, maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe typing is still faster than saying if X larger than Y, then go to.
Yeah, but this is something which will not happen. You will not say if then. You will just say, give me a function that does this somehow.
Exactly.
Not line by line, and then you are much faster.
Yeah, but that's what I've always been interested in. I think, it's. I hear what you're saying, and I'm not actually looking for any official statement from you as a Siemens employee. We're not discussing here the official, strategy towards where are you as a company moving, right? Let's make that very clear. But, right. And if that is so, we can nevertheless, discuss very openly on what could happen, what may happen, what may not happen, right?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So this is...
Because what it is that I'm kind of looking for is to say, how can we, if Satya saying, and you put the word Excel there, I heard him say that as well.
A thin UI layer, he mentioned. A thin UI.
Yeah, but what does that mean? I mean, you already gave an idea here, but what is the relationship between, if, assuming, I haven't heard Deutsche Telekom is going to continue with Brain AI and have my smartphone is lying here on my desk, And if I click on it, like millions of other people do exactly the same. Doesn't matter if it's a Samsung, Google, operating system based, Apple, whatever it is. But the idea is very similar. I click on it, and then there's on one screen 1 or 10, and there's 10 other screens of maybe 10 apps. And so the idea from a consumer perspective that Jerry has brought forward with Deutsche Telekom there, I think he was the first one, I'm not sure. And I hope to get him in this podcast as well at some point, is to say, no, if I have a large language model, I can talk to my phone and I'm going to ask it to do, that's one, whatever I want. And I'm convinced that it will, be helping me as well. I come to that in a moment. Is that something we can imagine also on the shop floor in this case? Or again, if you say in the engineering environment, just really thinking out of the box, is there something you can see there?
Yeah, from my personal view, I would say why not? Typically, all the developments which are out there needs some time to come into the industry. That's a typical problem, and I understand this. Also, we have a lot of standards, and we don't want to change a running system that easy, right? So that's why I think it will not happen as fast as we see this maybe in the consumer area or smartphones and stuff like this. But at some point it will become usual. I don't know the time frame for that, and I'm really not sure to give one because I'm not really doing the research there. I'm just a consumer more or less. But I could imagine that this is going to happen much faster than in previous times. I mean, look at this. We are 2 years away from the announcement of OpenAI. And where are we now? And I have doubts to say what will be in 2 years, further 2 years.
To be honest, I'm really looking forward to it brought me back. I told Robert a week ago in our first podcast of the year, because when I was with Intel, that's 25 years ago, and I believe I was the first one to go to Barcelona and see what was happening there. I was almost thinking of going there again this time, which I assume, I will come that later. At the moment, there's CES. So if I really want to know after our talk, I'm going to look there, because if there will be one other second place, maybe even the biggest number one place where you guys are actually as well, probably CES. So let's see. How do your agents work? My feeling is that as we discuss what the status of what is an agent, and as we're now, my feeling is that it's a large language model in front of apps or in front of, that was the idea, right? Is there a piece of software that is going to go straight to the data? So let's say to the back office, to the background where the data sits, or would you say, well, would be almost stupid, because you said don't change the running system, but at least you will have so many, let's say, application or building blocks, let's call them building blocks, where you have put so much effort into. And maybe you say, well, rather than if I say, go and check if the pressure for sensor XYZ is okay, rather than maybe writing an app on the fly, going there, getting it back, maybe you say, well, that's useless, because I know exactly that I have a building block that does exactly that. So the agent will use the building block to get the information.
Yes, the first part of your question, of course, you need language models for that. So this is the thing we are using here. And I think we don't have to invent or change a lot of software which we worked years on, right? So there's, of course, if you start from scratch, you might think a little bit different, really LLM first approach. But yeah, there's no problem to make a software, or it's not that complex or complicated to make a normal app, which I don't know, has been developed 10 years ago, to make this agentic. So as far as if you have an API, and most of big, let's say, software has API, then you are good to go. So if you have an API, you can make an endpoint configuration, so you can define what these endpoints are doing in a natural language way. And this is the input for the language model. At the end, the language model does not know about your software itself. So it is not executing it on its own, but it knows about the capabilities described in natural language. And then you can do operations at the end on your software. So you don't necessarily need to change a lot in your existing software. That is the good news, I would say.
But coming back to Satya says where agents are going to replace old software.
Yeah, it depends. So if you have a really,
Yeah, sure.
let's say, complex UI, then, for example, Google Maps or stuff like this. I mean, it's anyway in the cloud, but how will you show this on the agentic side? So, I mean, it's not a problem to shift the business logic from your former apps to the AI layer. But let's say showing this in your own UI might be feasible also in the future.
I'm with you. It's a good example. I've a list of examples here, and I'll add two more. I would agree with you that staying with the phone, and then you, listener, you yourself, are we now discussing, we do the translation into the shop floor or the engineering environment, but just so everybody is with us. So rather than clicking on my smartphone and looking, I know where it is. This is page number 2 or 3. Everybody has their own design, right? HMI. Rather than clicking and looking for, let's say with the Google Maps, I say, number one is I say, bring me to Frankfurt. I give the address, right? Robert does the same thing when I sit with him in a car. And the next thing, by the way, is, and then, so what it means is I don't see the representation of, in this case specifically, the Google Maps icon. And I think that's a very structural change. The next thing is, I get up in the morning and my agent will know that in about an hour's time, I'm supposed to be, let's say, driving or taking the public transport, but let's say with the car for the moment. And it will just open, it will just tell me, Peter, are you ready to go? We're getting late, the roads are getting dense, you need to move. So I will not be saying anything, because my agent will just be guiding me there. Now let's sit there for a moment. So that was the example of the navigation, and that's happening with all the other apps. I'm completely convinced if I want to write an email, I'm not going to look for the Outlook app as an example. I'm going to say, write me a mail to whoever, and etc., etc., etc. So that is what I feel, and maybe staying with, and then I'm going to ask you for what you can imagine is the similarities going to be in the industrial environment. So I'm certain that very soon my agent will book a hotel room, as an example, for me in Frankfurt. Why am I saying that? Because January 22, there is the Hannover Messe Industrial AI Conference. And the agent will say, and if I ask you why, did you? Well, Peter, I was saying that the prices, and this is just a theoretical example, that the prices were moving up. So I thought I'd just, book you a hotel. That's, I'm sure, what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Question to you. If you're following that and maybe agree, is there a similarity with what is happening or what could happen on the shop floor in an industrial setting?
Yeah, it can help you on the fly, exactly like a situation you mentioned. This is from the consumer perspective. But if you start to code, for example, and the system knows about the overall context and you make a mistake there, then it might give you directly and proactively a message, you shouldn't do that because you are, I don't know, not following the naming code or the naming conventions, because there's an agent in the background which searches for this and detects that and gives you then the message. And you can think about other scenarios there too, but definitely it will support you. It will be an assistant. You are right. You're writing about personal assistant. And here you will have kind of working support and work assistant.
The next level is again going to be about, is the good old bring your own device. Not sure we still have that. Was it called BYD, BOT or something? Is the, as you say, is the work. So the PA is what I'm convinced we're all going to have, personal assistant. And then, yes, does that mean when I'm within my working environment, is there going to be a BA, a business assistant? And will I going to be allowed to walk into, let's say, stay to, the factory environment with my PA, and my PA will you do whatever it is, because so I move in, the environment recognizes that I'm 5 minutes early for my job, so knows, okay, Peter is there. And when then the BA has something to communicate to me, will communicate to I moved too far, maybe, I believe, but
Yeah, but why not? I mean, this is absolutely justified. I mean, why not combining also personal assistance with your daily work assistant and stuff like this? Anyway, I think this will be a huge agent economy. Let's say it like this: we had this app economy back then, and now we are going through this agent economy. And there will be market stores, there will be authorization levels where you then just connect from one agent to the other one, from one assistant to the other one, stick them together and get a new result and new capabilities, for example.
Armin, let's come to a close slowly. Maybe tell us a little bit more about your working environment. I assume that you don't work by yourself. Is there a team? What are the people doing directly with you or within your direct environment? How does that? You want to share a little bit without going into too much secret details, I guess. But
Yes. Yeah, typically we have this hybrid working model. So we have the possibility to work also from home. And we are also often in the campus in Erlangen. We have a couple of teams working on this topic, basically really to realize this product vision of version 2. But of course, we have also support from our research, which is all over the world, aiming and also researching newest technology here in this regards, trying to standardize in some portions, I would say, this new technology. And yeah, a lot of people working here. To be honest, I don't know the exact number, but
yeah, it was more like for the atmosphere. Yeah, what is it? I mean, you gave us your kind of way towards where you are today. Is it very strong automation, engineering backgrounds of your colleagues, or?
yeah, of course. I mean, we are all engineers with different backgrounds, but we are all using AI, of course. I mean, we cannot create an AI product and not using on our own. So this is a thing which is really common in our teams. Everybody is very curious about this new technology. So everybody wants to take part in these early steps here. I mean, you don't have often a chance to build something from the ground, and we see also the first effects of our work, and everybody's curious about this. And of course, with a very volatile environment in regards of technology, every day there's a new model out there. I just want to mention one thing. I was really happy when I read, I think that was also before Christmas, a statement from Ilya from OpenAI, or former OpenAI, where he stated that there's a plateau reached. And I said, thanks God, and now the models are freezed and we can work with one dedicated model. We anyway have 10 years work with that model. But then in the evening, Sam Altman responded tweet like, there is no wall. And then I was again back. But this is the environment we are living in, very changing, very exciting times. And
yeah, and a very high interest. Am I correct in believing that I saw you supporting a demo with your CEO as well on exactly the same topic? Or
yeah, that was last year. That was the operation use case. So basically, we had a robot arm which was picking things from one side to the other one. And cool thing here was we managed to set up this whole scenario in half an hour. So, I mean, the components were there, will stick together, but the program itself, we used our Copilot to get into the library, stick them together, and all by entering and giving requests to the Industrial Copilot. And the system was able to stick these things together. So at the end, we had then a working machine, and with one small feature from the operations side where Roland stepped into the machine, and there were sensors, the security sensors measuring that and giving then the result to our operations Copilot, which then states there's someone inside or near the machine, and I have to drop down or slow down the speed of a robot arm. Yeah, and also with giving a voice answering to Roland Busch, and it was really amazing to see how that worked.
Very good. Final question. So, as your colleague Peter Curti, we did an interview with Peter a year ago, I think. CTO, also newly appointed Siemens board member. I believe he's presenting, I already said before, CES, Las Vegas Consumer Electronics Show. What would you say as far as you just said, you are a global company, you receive inputs from all over the world. What would you say is the status of industrial agents, maybe also in relation to consumer agents? Are we waiting? Are we sometimes driving? And how do you see the global situation? How are we in Europe doing things in relation to United States, China, maybe other parts of the world? And bottom line, do you consider this complete development towards agents as a threat or more as an opportunity?
Now let's start with the last question. I don't think this is a threat. It is a very big change, structural change in the working environment and how you get things done. This is not a threat. In the past, we had a lot of modifications in our daily life. The only, let's say, it's not only, it's a really big change. The thing is really, it affects everything. So it's not only at the work, it's in your personal life and so on and so forth. So it's not a threat from my perspective. It's only, the possibility to make a change. And if you're ready for that, I think then you are good to go. And if you have fears here, then you might overthink the situation. But I think it's not a threat. I forgot almost the entry question here, but
yeah, it's almost like where we're standing. I mean, are we sometimes driving or within the industrial environment, I would say, or are we looking more towards like what's happening in a consumer space? And
from my view, we are looking at things on the consumer side, to be honest. And I mentioned it already, it typically takes some time to adapt in the industry, the latest things. I think also very few time or in a short time, we will have the first agent stores. I mean, we have already one or two or maybe also more, but we will have some major agent stores. Think just about the App Store and the marketplace from Apple and Android and Google. So these are the major players when it comes to app economy. And I think there will be also 2 or 3 major players when it comes to agent stores in the future. So I don't know where the industry will end up, if we will have an own agent store, so not from Siemens side, but really from the overall industrial perspective. I'm not sure. Maybe we will also participate in the normal agent stores, in the consumer agent stores. Rather not. So we will have an own solution, I guess. But this is something which will come in the future, but typically always with a short delay comparing to the consumer part.
I want to thank you very much taking us by the hand, starting with PLC programming, moving towards the industrial co-pilot, extending it with moving towards or including agents from the App Store to the agent store. That's a nice way to put it together, I would say. Yeah, listeners, if you want to get in touch with Armin, you can reach him best by LinkedIn. We refer to a couple of interesting points that we will share with you in the show notes. And otherwise, if you have any questions, comments, as always, please send me a short email, peter@aipod.de. I'm very happy that you stayed with us so far. Looking forward to have you with us again. And Armin, thank you very much for your wonderful information.
Thank you, Peter. It was a pleasure to me to join here in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.